Hey, and welcome to another episode of Espresso Talks, brought to you by Vivet. Today, we're going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the signing of the Agile Manifesto. So check out this event. My special guest today is Giles, a good friend of mine. So, Giles, welcome to the show. You are officially the Agile 20 Reflect Festival UK ambassador. How does it feel?
Feels great. Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to the month of February. I mean, who'd have thought that in a global pandemic, we could end up as a global community hosting over 600 events worldwide.
That sounds amazing. So for those people who don't know kind of about the Agility Leadership Network and kind of the work that you've been doing in the Agile space over the last however many years, it'd be great to get a bit of an introduction about what you guys are all about.
Yeah, look, for us, it's always been about trying to create a global community sort of for the people, by the people. That's what it's about. There's enough of us who were old enough and grey enough and whatever who've sort of been around the block, got the war wounds, got the successes, and we want to be able to share that back with those people who are now coming up through the ranks in the Agile world. And so, for us to actually have the opportunity to give back is something which is actually pretty awesome. And that's a huge part of what this festival event is about as well, giving back to others around the world. And we've just had the opportunity, obviously, with yourself and our good friend Paul and Ashley as well, to be able to put on, a mega event, if you like, on February the 12th, which by my last count early this morning, we had over 1,300 people signed up for.
That's incredible. It's amazing to see just how much critical mass has followed that from that original kind of signing of the manifesto over 20 years ago. And I know yesterday was the launch event for you and a number of those speakers who'll be joining us and had a huge attendance to show you just how, alive Agile is in and how relevant it still is 20 years on. So tell me a little bit about this event. You've got an event lined up on the 12th, and it's a Agile Futurespective. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things is we wanted an opportunity to get some awesome thought leaders to come along to that same community, come along and share what it's meant for them, how it shaped their careers over the last 20 years, why they've become some of the big household names through obviously this particular way of working, this philosophy, this mindset. And also we want to get to their aspiration for what the next 10, 20 years is going to look like as well. Recently we obviously both spoke to Dave Snowden at the Vivet Worldwide Days conference. And we had pretty much sort of a similar conversation with him, and he gave us his thought leadership on where things are going to happen and where they're going next. So this is awesome because we've just got some great names turning up to the event for a 3-hour extravaganza with obviously myself, yourself, Paul and Ashley hosting this event. And it's going to be great fun. Shall we share who some of the people who are coming up at the event?
Yeah, no, I think it would be great to kind of kick off maybe that one of the headliners as well, Brian, who was one of the original signatories of the Agile Manifesto. So, tell us a little bit about, about Brian.
Yeah, well, Brian is obviously, a huge representative in that software quality assurance space. And for us, I think one of the things we wanted to make sure was we actually had diversity, not just in terms of people, different geographic regions, but also from the different touch points of Agile. So we've got people who are representing from especially that technology, software engineering, software quality assurance space in terms of Brian. We've got Jurgen Appelo coming along, especially talking to us, the guy who created Management 3.0. So, what that actually means to everybody as well. We've then got Geoff Watts coming along, who creates and writes all the books in the product development space. And we're really, grateful that he can come along and represent that product development, product management, product ownership space, and all the people that are coming along to that. We've then got a good friend of mine, Mark Lyons, coming in, who is obviously one of the co-founders, again with another great friend, Scott Ambler, of Disciplined Agile, recently acquired by the PMI. And so he's coming along and doing one of our lightning talks as well. We have Ray Arell, CEO of the Agile Alliance, coming along, and a good friend of yours, Jonathan. He's turning up to also represent on the evening.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's been many years. I think he came up on my Facebook feed the other day because he was there. We were in London for the Olympics, and I've had the pleasure of many years of Ray's wisdom, and I'll share you some of those stories later on. But it'd be great to have there's such an amazing lineup. And also, I guess that last session of the day around Laura, that's going to be an incredible session. Could you give us a little bit more about Laura and where she fits into this all?
Yeah, Laura, what a great ambassador to certainly be having at the event as well. Doing our closing keynote speech. And she has recently taken on the number 2 seat at the Business Agility Institute. And so not only am I working with her in terms of kickstarting and setting up the UK chapter of the Business Agility Institute, but to also have her supporting our event and coming along and doing her closing keynote is phenomenal. I'm catching up with her this afternoon. So I'm going to be finding out how her preparations for the event are going, and also to have a good chat and how she's supporting us with the launch of the UK chapter. So again, phenomenal to have Laura as our closing keynote at the end of the event.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be great. And we've kind of purposely mixed this up a little bit in the sense of trying to make it, interactive from the start. It's a panel discussion. It's going to be, incredibly insightful. It gets people involved. There's going to be a Slido channel with the hashtag Agile where people can, submit all their questions to these, fantastic speakers, right? And then we then go into this kind of TED style 20-minute sessions, which are really inspirational talks. We didn't want it to be an hour or 45 minutes or 30 minutes of a presentation. We wanted that, let's inspire people for the next 20 years, right? And then, like you said, the closing keynote being, Laura and just her incredible wealth of knowledge in this space to really facilitate, again, that same thing, a bit of a closing keynote with a bit of insight on her journey, but then also this kind of interactivity with yourself and Ashley and a few other people who really want to get back involved and kind of ask some of those really, critical questions. I think there's something there for everyone. And I think equally on demand, it's going to be, an incredible event if you do miss it. But obviously, put it into your diary. It's the 12th of February, which is a Friday, and it's running from 5 p.m. till 8 p.m. Now, that's UK time. But of course, it'll be available across the globe, and with over 1,000 registrants. And it's just going to be an incredible event. And I think we're going to get some really interesting questions, and it's going to really challenge people to think what Agile really means. And I think it'd be great for those listeners that maybe aren't that familiar with Agile to kind of talk about maybe the journey a little bit, where it started, why it started, and kind of where it's gone. So, back in 2001, it was very different how people were developing software. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about, how Agile was born?
Yeah, I think obviously everybody has their own particular version and cut of this story. From my perception, and what it meant for me is that I graduated obviously mid-90s, started working in fairly traditional bureaucratic waterfall V model style software engineering practices and approaches. And of course, there was this movement suddenly happening behind the scenes, which was gaining some serious traction, wanting to sort of change and overcome the friction and the problems that traditional software development, software engineering teams and departments and capabilities were facing. And so, of course, don't forget, we'd already had Scrum as a framework being released and launched in October 1995. And as such, it was part of that movement, DSDM as well, XP, all of these things started that sort of cascade towards creating this agile movement and this signing of this manifesto in February 2001 in Snowbird, Utah. And then on the back end of that, obviously, it's evolved over the last 20 years, just simply as something, as a mindset, as a philosophy, beyond software engineering, but also into what it means across an entire organization, that business agility, where the Business Agility Institute, led by Evan Laybourne and obviously Laura, has emerged from to support organizations at a completely different level to where they were being supported 20 years ago. So it's been a journey. There's certainly no end to this. It's going to evolve. The language, the narrative, the vernacular is going to change over the coming years. It'll probably simplify a lot in a lot of areas as well. But hopefully, for people like myself, this is just going to become the de facto norm, the de facto way of working in organizations. It won't even be part of the conversation. It won't be part of the literature. It won't be part of trying to say, we're not doing this or we're not doing that. It will just be in the same way 20 years ago. We were always talking about, is your company broadband enabled? Is it internet enabled? Do we ever ask that question 20 years on? No. It's just it's a given. It's a taken factor that it's there. You are broadband internet enabled today in 2021.
No, absolutely, and it is interesting. It's kind of where everybody was. I must admit, 2001. I was working for Siemens, which was Siemens Engineering, and so I was a heavy based V model, waterfall, sequential, engineering base, and I must admit, I loved that environment. It was, but the release cycles were 12
arduous.
to 5 years, right? And but associated with that was a certain level of quality, right? Certain types of organization, you've got a certain kind of awareness of the brand, like German cars, right? We've seen things like Lean come along and Toyota and all those great things that have kind of changed the way manufacturing is being done, and whether or not that's resulted in things like Tesla and people being able to challenge the market with new and innovative products, right, and bring them quicker to market. And I think everyone's got this journey, and and Agile has been part of that. And I remember, and I was just trying to look for the book. I remember writing a book on enterprise Agile when it kind of people started trying to understand how to scale kind of Agile within an organization, because they'd seen the success that teams could do by having this agility. But then there was this kind of question around, well, how do we get the rest of the organization to get on board and scale that across? And I guess this is where a lot of the safe, dad, less kind of movement started to really kind of challenge, right? How do we incorporate some kind of structure around that to allow organizations to scale Agile? So do you think we're still part of that journey, or do you think that's really the next challenge?
No, I think we're still part of that journey. I think we have also moved on slightly beyond that. We had problems to begin with, all right? And it's always been a given. Some of these frameworks, methodologies that sort of came about, emerged in the early 2000s, sort of were purposefully devised to sort of be anti-patterns, if you like, to sort of traditional management processes and other things, to move away from bureaucracy and command and control and micromanagement and kind of all of those other crazy things. And of course, ultimately, that left the people that needed to change the most behind on that journey. So there they were, the development teams doing the crazy, amazing stuff. And there was the sort of the senior management, the leadership in these organizations, suddenly feeling like they were losing control, losing grip of what was actually going on within the outcomes the technology teams were creating. And it was because nobody was taking them on the same journey as the rest of the team. So there you had this engineering team, this technology team in the middle of an organization, I don't know, 20% of the workforce. You had 80% of the workforce still working in those sort of traditional bureaucratic, waterfall, standard finance, annual budgeting process ways of working. So what was the one team that was the odd one out here? It was the technology team. They were the one that was sort of creating the friction with all of the other parts of the organization for many, many, many years, until obviously this sort of idea that, guess what, those same approaches that you could apply to the technology team could be applied to the marketing team or the finance team or the legal team or to the C-suite. And I think a lot of people have realized over the last few years, probably the last 4 or 5 years, that actually a lot of businesses, you mentioned people like Tesla and other people, where they're applying that mindset and that way of working across an entire organization, they're reaping the benefits of it. They're reaping the rewards of it, absolutely. And it's evidentially clear when that happens. So I think, while there's a place for all of these frameworks and other things to exist, genuinely, I think that we're probably moving beyond that. We've got to be thinking about simply creating agility in our organizations by being as pragmatic as possible, trying to look at the context of what's going on, applying the right strategy for the right context to get that, agility to happen, removing waste in process, removing those trade-offs, those long waiting sort of waterfall protracted processes, getting them out of the way. And getting things to market quicker, getting that business agility in place, achieving those successful business outcomes. So for me, there's always going to be a place for all of these things in process, but it's really about trying to sort of mobilize organizations to have more organizational agility going forwards. I think we'll see people will be taking the best bits of this and that and that and this and creating something hybrid which is fit for that organization. You don't crush an organization into a particular framework and crush the living daylights out of it. You actually, take the organization and create a nice wrapper that actually works for the organization, and making sure you're taking everybody on the journey. Don't leave anybody behind. And I think that's where, we'll see the success now really starting to happen going forwards.
Absolutely. And I guess, I know we've talked about this in the past, but, one of the challenges, I guess, of trying to retrofit a factory model or the success of a manufacturing model into a software development life cycle is, they're not the same thing, right? One might be producing cars, one's producing software, which is very different and has its own different challenges, right? And I think, this is an interesting kind of turning point that we're at, right? And you talk about organizational agility, which I think is a bigger conversation. It's that conversation, and I know we've talked about what we call BIT, which is this business information technology. It's bringing business and information technology 100%. Together, the same way that Google would bring product and engineering to create product engineering, right? It's part of bridging the chasm between those two very different types of organizational working, right, and mindsets. And I think it is a bigger discussion, right? It's not a development, it's not a project management, it's not a product management. It's something that sits across the top of the organization, and a decision that's made by an Elon, by Bill Gates, that they want to change the organization to be able to keep up with the pace of change, and also technology is no longer just the enabler. It's the business, right? It's the business which you buy a product from, and you represent a brand, whether that be a trainer or a car, right? Part of it is there's a lot more moving components than the end product. And it's not a project anymore. It's that was kind of what Gartner said at the start of 2020, was that we're not seeing the investment in IT projects, but actually in products. And I think this is again another change in mentality. And my personal experience with being in Silicon Valley with a large pure play software vendor, part of it was we looked at we adopted SAFe, right? And that, Dean has put a fantastic framework and methodology in supporting. But again, there's criticism around it being over heavy, right? Now it's not pure agile, right? The purists kind of look at it saying, well, part of it is lightweight, shouldn't have all that kind of stuff. But for an organization that is 70 billion, a year, then, part of it is they need something that they can scale across the organization. So we used to do, in Santa Clara, big PI planning every quarter, right? We'd have all of the team from the C-suite to product to, sales, marketing, all in a big room. And we'd have the ropes on the side. We'd go through and look at, break into teams and think about products and really feed in some of that value stream management, which people are talking about in kind of understanding capabilities and enablement within the organization and things that we wanted to change. And of course, again, software development is one thing, but that might not be the sum of all your business, right? You may be a hardware organization, which ironically the company I work for was bought out by a hardware company. And I think that again has a certain life cycle, right? And my story with Ray was I remember going to Hillsborough in Portland, right, and going to see the Intel campus, which 10,000 people, huge campus. Obviously, Intel renowned for making hardware, right? And yep. Ray spent his entire career as kind of moving the agile momentum within Intel, right, across Mexico, the US, all these different countries. And it was really interesting because the thing that I always remember from what Ray said was it got to about 15% was the kind of the critical mass across the organization, because they got to a point where we couldn't say Intel is agile, right? You can't say everyone in Intel is agile. You have to say the bits which are would benefit the most from it would be have gone through that kind of education or that kind of transformation or whatever word best envisioning of this new kind of methodology and approach. And I was always really shocked, and I went in and it was a mindset, right? Every office had changed from these kind of pig pens with people sat in, individual locations to these suites which had, sofas in them, and they had artists drawing the product direction as on the walls. And Ray would always be dialing in whether he was a robot, so he had a robot version himself which would navigate through the halls of Intel, talk to people so that he could be in multiple countries at the same time. They weren't flying over, they were interacting, they were collaborating, they had interactive whiteboards, they would have meetings, and some 40% of the staff were moving around with robots, right? And to me that was probably 5 years ago, maybe longer now. And that vision of what the maturity and the level of adoption they got to is maybe where I've not seen some of the other organizations that I've dealt with get to. They maybe it isn't right for them, but at the same time, that journey is a very long one, and it would mean something different to everybody. So, for those people who are listening and kind of thinking about the 12th, and what they're going to take away from it, and maybe what the questions they need to ask, what are those kind of challenges that you think people should be thinking about when it comes to agility?
Well, I think it's got to be those questions about how do they get the leadership to get inspired to stand up behind this as well. I still daily have conversations with people through the business, talking to them about I'm trying a bottom-up approach. I'm middle management, and I'm trying to actually bring around a sort of an agile evolution in our organization, not a transformation. It doesn't just sort of happen the once. And as such, they sort of say to me, but I'm always blocked, or I have resistance, or resistance is here at this level or that level within the organization as well. And I think you've just got to keep having that conversation, keep showing them the successes, keep pointing them to people who can tell what great looks like, what bad looks like, and everything else in between. And you've got to get the leadership behind this to support it, to get inspired, so that you know everything you're doing, all the mistakes and the failures, and then the successes that come from the learning from those mistakes and failures are wholly supported, right? And so you actually feel, you haven't got to hide behind a parapet. You can actually, you're not going to stick your head above it and suddenly get one between the eyes from the senior leadership team. You know what, you're going to get a arm around your shoulder saying, never mind, come on, let's get on again, and let's see what we can do next iteration or with the next release, whatever that is. And for me, I think that's it. This comes back to that sort of organizational agility. I think the other thing is also about getting better communication across the organization, so that the finance teams truly understand. I mean, 20 years on, and I'm still having conversations with finance teams and marketing teams and sales teams, and they're kind of going, what is this agile thing? And it's crazy that we're still in this conversation 20 years on. I think, we should have done a lot more, a lot earlier in process to actually overcome some of those challenges. But I suppose we didn't know what the challenges were. They've naturally evolved as organizations have. You're absolutely spot on. The technology isn't standing still, and you don't put a way of working in place and that's it forevermore. Once you've created something, that's it. We never change, we never inspect, we never adapt, we never iterate and change it. Well, guess what? The technology around us is changing quicker than we can probably actually respond to at times. So we still need to make sure our ways of working actually work with that technology as well, and we can respond to those changes taking place, because otherwise we're just going to hurt ourselves in a different way. So, I think there has to be conversations as to what's that support look like with our cohort, the amazing people coming along to the event. I think it's, what do they see the next 5, 10, 20 years looking like as well? What inspiration can they draw from that? And really go from there. I think, I'm certainly going to sit there, as an open book, waiting to consume a huge amount of new thought leadership from these guys that are all coming along, and kind of then going, okay, I'm going to put some of this in practice going forwards and see what I can do with it. And I think that's where we want, as you know, the people to come along using Slido, #Agile, when we share the link a few days before the event starts, to start getting the questions in, especially for all of the Q&A panels, and for our sort of mega Q&A panel at the end, where we all come back on camera. All the speakers who have been part of the festivities all come back, join on for that sort of global group Q&A session at the end of the event, and have some amazing conversations with everyone.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, and I know one of the things we, which is a bit of a bonus, which we're going to introduce at the end. So, this is just an world exclusive for the podcast listeners. But we're looking at creating a Agile 20 Reflections ebook out of the back of this, which is going to be a completely free forever collaboration of all the outcomes of what this one session is. So yeah, if you can watch it on demand, but if they're not able to get to the questions that you really want, we're going to make sure we get them. We'll follow up with them afterwards and get some of those great kind of directions, some of that great wisdom, as you kind of pointed out, over, such a talented group. But it's also designed to be for everybody, right? So we want to hear your story. If you've got a story about Agile, the good, the bad, the ugly, then, we want you to contribute too.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great snapshot, because there'll be people who have recently left schools, universities, other things as well, who are now entering into this world. And hopefully, for the best part of their career, it'll be the de facto way of working, right? And they won't have experienced, or they won't get to experience some of that sort of bureaucracy, command and control, micromanagement out there. Yet at the same time, there's going to be those who, like yourself, like myself, who've been through it for the majority of all of those 20 years. We are going to be able to talk about those successes, those failures, those people that have supported the growth of the mindset and the approach in organizations, and those people who purport that they knew how to do it and what to do and completely stifled it and killed it. And I've worked with both ends of that scale, certainly during my career. So I think there's a lot for people to be able to share. And what we do, and we will be making some big announcements and getting people to know where they have to go to add into this, but we'll create this snapshot. this 2021 20th anniversary snapshot of everybody's sort of mindset, ideas, get this into an ebook, and then get everybody to actually share on a map as well where they are in the world and who's actually applied input into the ebook as well. And then we'll see what we do. Possibly in 5 years' time, we'll do a refresher of it. And then a 5 years' time after that, we'll do another refresher of the book as well and get more and more people to input and see whether perceptions and mindsets have changed over that time frame as well. Now, I think we will. I think there'll be a bit of an acceleration of change now happening. And, it's only going to be for the positive, only for the good.
Absolutely. And I guess, if, as Ray would probably say, resistance is futile, right? Part of it is, it doesn't matter where you are or what you do, whether you're just starting your career out as a young professional or you're in a large engineering organization, there's going to be aspects of this that you can learn from. And that in Yoda would say, wisdom there is, we would get some real value in sharing where we are and, those challenges we've had, and also reflecting back, right? People like Tom Gilb, who wrote Evo, predating kind of the Agile Manifesto, who were talking about evolutional design and this kind of iterative approach. One of the challenges, and I guess it's been there on a reason, is the Agile Manifesto has never changed, right? It's not it hasn't been agile, right? It's not been updated. It's the core values have stayed the same, and I think that also needs a tweaking for people who it means something different. It may mean they don't actually have a customer, so they have to think about, who it matters to, the certain aspects. So I think, part of it is everyone's going to have a different opinion to this, and like you said, there's also been this kind of industry trend which we get, and it's the same with DevOps. Is something comes out a few years later, everyone says we're doing DevOps, right? And it's kind of that kind of area that they want to be able to tick the box that they've done it. And like you said, it's a journey. It's it's an evolution. It's not a revolution. It's not a big bang. It's not changing all the processes and procedures within organization and tick the box. And I think that's what happened. We lost a lot of momentum with that. We're already doing agile, or we're being agile. There was a very different understandings, levels of maturity or capability, or and I think this really has moved us all into a different location. It all means something very different now for 2020. So everyone's got a very valid viewpoint, and we want to hear all of those viewpoints, and we've got some of the leading experts here to take those questions and tell you what they think, right? What their heart is saying to what the next 20 years is going to look like. So kind of finishing it off, for those people who want to get involved more, right, what would your recommendations be for kind of things to sign up to, as far as kind of the agility leadership, where is the support networks to help people find out more about agile and what's going on?
Well, there's as we've seen, especially with this festival event that's happening, this festival, I should say, that's happening throughout the month of February. There are over 600 events happening globally, right? So, there's going to be something in your geographic region that you can sign up to. You only have to Google Agile 20 Reflect, and you'll end up on the page where you can go and find all 600 events. You can also go to agile20.org, come and join up with the Agility Leadership Network, and also sign up for our sort of mega festival event, trying to get it obviously to be one of the big events of the month of February. And come and reach out to us, talk to us on LinkedIn. If you want ideas about who to talk to, where to go, what to join, there's a lot of us out there who have got that experience, who've sort of been through those pitfalls and troughs and peaks, and so we know the best places to go and find this out and go and discover this. So there's many ways of getting in touch: LinkedIn, Agility Leadership Network, through the Agile 20 Reflect website as well. And come and talk to us, obviously, at the event on the 12th.
Brilliant. And that's agile20.org. And, if you go and sign up now, like we said, we've got over 1,300 people on there already. Yep. And we've still got to, a good 10 days before the launch, right? So, there's, plenty of time to get your questions in and start thinking about what you want to ask these agile legends, right? And I know you are officially the Agile Wizard, but yeah, reach out definitely to Giles and Ash and all these other people who will point you in the right direction. That you'll get invited to the Slack channels. You'll be able to ping them, ask them questions. It's all about helping each other and moving this forwards for the greater good. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I can't wait for the event on the 12th.
Thanks, Jonathan. See you soon, and see you on the 12th.